Today's video contains subject matter that some viewers may consider sensitive, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a true scary story you want to send my way, please go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And thank you. This isn't a typical scary story, but having a dream the other day about this kid made me remember something that happened so long ago. Back in the early 90s, when I was about 14, my parents moved to a new town because of my dad's work, transferring him to work alongside an Air Force base. His work was in aircrafts, so he was offered several positions, and this one allowed our family to stay in the same state, but over 179 miles away. We moved into a nice, big, but older home. Compared to our previous home, it seemed like a mansion to us. As the new city, the homes were a lot cheaper, so my parents could afford a bigger home. There was a time period before we moved in that my parents renovated the house, but I would help, and during that time, I saw a kid that lived next door to us. He wasn't my age, but maybe a year or two younger. Coming from the town that I grew up in, all the kids in my old neighborhood knew me and were my friends, and we would always hang out, ride bikes, play ball and stuff. So seeing that kid next door was pretty close to my age, it made me a little less upset about the move. He seemed pretty cool. He was a skater-type kid. I was more a BMX bike kid, but I thought over time we would become friends. I knew he went to junior high, and I was in high school, but I didn't care. I just wanted someone on my block that was my age, as most of the homes looked like either retired or no kids kind of neighborhood. Shortly after we all moved in, I started talking with him. At first it was like, hey, what's up? And then it was a little more, like talking about music, video games, things that were cool to do in town, which there weren't many options. A couple times, I was outside doing chores like mowing the lawn, and he was out doing the same. I felt like we were starting to become friends. He also had another best friend that was always over. This friend was his age and went to his school, and I got the impression that they knew each other since elementary, and this kid lived a block or two away. One day, I got home from school and I saw the neighbor kid and his best friend outside playing, and I noticed they were throwing clumps of mud or dirt at each other. I saw that they were picking the clumps of mud from areas around the tree that was bordering both of our homes. I didn't want to play that because I felt it was too kiddie for me. I went to my backyard and was working out, as I had a little gym set up on the side of my house. I saw that they were hitting the side stucco of our house. Knowing my dad, he would have been furious about that. So, I went from my backyard to the front yard and told both guys, hey, you guys better stop doing that because my dad'll get upset if you keep hitting the house, or worse, his Cadillac in the driveway. They yelled back, sorry, we won't throw them your way anymore. I just went back to my backyard and didn't think anything of it. The next day, I came home from school, and there were all these people standing outside. Some looked like family, some looked official like police. All the neighbors were outside, and a lot of people were crying. The neighbor kid's mom was crying almost on the floor. I ran inside to see my mom to ask what happened. She said there was some kind of accident, and that the boy had died in his sleep. I was like, oh my god, really? I felt so bad. Like, maybe I should have played with him yesterday. A little time passed after I was inside and looking out the screen door, and I noticed a cop coming over to my house. I believe my mom was there when I opened the door, and the cop said, "I hear you were playing with the boys yesterday." He asks me to step outside as the house had a porch area with chairs and a table. He said, "Were you playing with the neighbor boy and his friends?" I said no, that they were playing with mud and that I didn't want to get dirty, so I went to work out in the backyard. I started to tell him about how I saw them throwing mud clumps at each other, and that I went over and told them not to throw them at our house because a few hit the stucco, and I pointed to it. I said that my dad is very particular about the way the outside looks, and that I didn't want them to get in trouble. He asked me about the time, where I was, and he kept asking me, "Are you sure you didn't throw mud at them?" I started to get uneasy about the way he was asking me. I said no, I didn't want to get dirty. He looked at me like he didn't believe me, and I said, "Yesterday when I came home from school, I was wearing a black shirt and black jeans, so I didn't want mud all over them, but that I did change into shorts and an old t-shirt, and then went to work out." I pointed to the side gate as to show him that I had a weight bench, punching bag, and barbells. The officer kept asking me, "So, are you saying you did not throw mud or rocks at them?" I said yes, I did not throw anything. I also told him that I didn't want the boys to get in trouble because my dad would have been really upset if they broke a window, covered our stucco with mud, or worse, hit his caddy. The cop says, "I'm going to ask your parents to bring you in if what you're saying doesn't match up." I said, "What is all this about?" But he didn't say. My mom finally found out. The kid had gotten hit in the side temple with a rock, and not a mud clump. And then he went inside. He later complained that his head hurt, and his mom gave him some Tylenol, and he went to bed, and then never woke up. Apparently, a neighbor mistakenly saw me outside with them, probably when I was telling them not to throw mud at our house, and he told the cops that I was outside with them throwing mud. My dad was ready to beat the crap out of me, but he ended up believing my story, and my mom also said that I was on the side of the house punching my punching bag. The cops finally got a statement from the other boy, who admitted that I was not involved, and that I had told them to stop. They ruled the death an accident, and they didn't charge the other boy. So, the other night, I had a dream that I was back at the house and looked over, and I saw him playing in the yard like he was always doing, and he looked over at me and then looked down. I don't know what made me dream about him since it's been over 30 years. I always felt sad for him, but eventually stopped thinking about it as high school went on. So, why is this a scary story? As an adult, I now realize that, at the time, I was a person of interest in the death of a boy. The neighbor lady who saw me outside put me at the scene. If the other friend had lied and said that it wasn't him, I would have been the main suspect, and being older, probably would have looked to file charges against me. Lastly, I didn't really fit in that neighborhood. I'm not white, and we lived in an all-white neighborhood. I dressed differently than nearly all the other kids. I was more into black, not emo, but was into looking like a greaser from The Outsiders. So that already made me look bad to the adults. Had things gone differently, who knows how my life could have been affected. This happened a few years ago, about when I had just turned 14. There was this dog who always would escape their owner's home. They were a dachshund. One day, the dog was in my yard when I got home from school. At the time, I had no idea who the owner was or where the dog came from, and I wanted to make sure that he stayed safe. My mom and I debated for a small while, and we decided to just keep him until we could find the owner. And because of his color, we named him Coffee for the time being. So, every day, I let Coffee out to use the bathroom. Most of the time, I would let him out in the afternoon to use the bathroom, and most of the time he never came back. And, being the kind-hearted young man that I am, I always went out before or when it was dark to find him. It didn't take me long to realize that he would take a specific path to get to what I now assume is his owner's house. But because at the time I wasn't really sure it was his owner, I would take him back to my house. So, one night, I went out of my house and called Coffee's name. And, like usual, he didn't come back. So I decided to go find him. I took the route that I knew I would find him on, which was to take a right on the road right in front of my house, and to take the first right. Then, Coffee was usually right by the stop sign down that road. So, without much notice, I just left my house and started walking down the road. As I get around halfway to where I'm supposed to turn, I start to hear guys talking about some controversial stuff. I don't understand why men wear all that makeup. It makes no sense. Yeah, and I don't think men should wear purses and something else, foggy memory. Now, I myself am gay, but I'm a pretty chill guy. And I understand that people have their own opinions, and that's okay. Still, though, the conversation made me feel a little weird. As I got closer to the two guys, one of them speaks to me. "Hey, baby," one of the men said, as if trying to assert dominance, trying to make me feel as though they are of a higher value than me. I froze in my tracks and slightly glared at the men. They were on the opposite side of the street. Because the only light source at the time was the moon and the street lamp at the point where I was supposed to turn, I wasn't able to see the men very well. I was able to make out that one of them was wearing a cap and that the other man was bald. Both of them were smoking, and I was able to tell that they were drinking. "Hey, baby," the man in the cap said again in the same tone. The bald man immediately lets out a chilling, dry laugh that struck me with a slight fear and left me feeling uneasy. A little startled but mostly confused, I didn't say anything to the men. "Are you looking for your doggy?" the man in the cap said in a low tone, again accompanied by his friend's chilling laugh. Though the pit in my stomach grew, I somehow got the courage to finally speak. Yeah, he ran away again," I said in a surprisingly calm tone. "I see you come out here every night." This comment made the pit of my stomach grow, because I know for a fact that every time I come out to find Coffee, the men in the truck that accompanied them were never once at that house. He continues talking about things that I can barely remember. All I can remember is the bald guy chuckling as he speaks to me. As the man continues talking to me, I slowly walk away from the men, nodding and acting like I'm paying them mind. Soon the man stopped talking to me, and then wished me luck on finding my dog. I finally get to my turn, and I kid you not, the moment I walk under the streetlight, it bursts. At this point, I'm internally freaking out and not entirely able to think clearly, but somehow I'm able to keep relatively calm. Stupidly, I didn't bring my phone, because the route to find Coffee was really short, so I didn't think I would need to bring my phone. I finally got to where Coffee usually is, and even whispered his name a few times, but to my surprise, he didn't come. I was debating what route I should take to get back to my house. There was another way to get back that didn't involve seeing those men again, but it's extremely dark and woodsy where I live, which means that there was a good chance I would bump into wildlife. So, I ended up deciding going back the way that I came, which was the shorter route anyways. But this time I ran through people's front yards stealthily and carefully. I passed by the men who hadn't seemed to move from when I first saw them. I finally got to my front yard and I decided to look back at where the men were. They had just gotten their truck and went all the way down the road that I was on. I rushed inside and immediately told my mom what happened. She was slightly concerned, but just told me not to go back out at night again. Not too long after this, my mom called me and told me that she found out that there was one man residing in that home who was a registered pedophile. My mom urged me not to go back out at night or by myself again, and I agreed. I'm 17 now, and I have my driver's license, and I do still live in the same small town where this incident took place. I drive by that house where I saw the men at every time I go out to get groceries. The weird thing is that there is never anyone at that house. Sadly, I don't know what happened to Coffee. I never found him after that night, and I still think of that night from time to time, thinking what would have happened if I was younger or didn't play my cards right. Or also, why exactly did that street lamp turn off the moment I walked under it? I'm writing this on my phone at work, and I'm still a bit shaken up. So, let me preface this by saying that I'm an overnight guard at a hospital. I've been here about 5 years or so. Overall, I've been working night security in various settings for about 12 years. Before that, I was a Marine. My point is that I'm used to odd situations and the general bumps in the night. The hospital where I work has had its shares of weird stuff happen, as many old buildings do, but nothing too crazy. Tonight was different, though. Part of the job is patrolling and unlocking this one really old building, as in one of the first buildings in the city old. It's currently used as the College of Nursing, but at night it's deserted. Well, about 3 a.m. or so, it's peaceful. I won't say the Q word. In the hospital, so I wander over to get the unlocks out of the way. I'm in this building a lot, probably 2 to 5 times a week, every week, for the last 5 years. I've gotten used to the creepiness, and honestly, I kinda like the quiet. Tonight was odd, though. As soon as I approached, I got this odd feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was that feeling of being watched by a predator. Anyone who's spent time in the woods knows the feeling. Your hackles raise, so to speak, and your mind screams, "Get out of there." I stop outside and I scan the street behind me and the courtyard that I'm standing in. Nothing obvious, but I cannot shake the feeling. I go inside and lock the doors behind me, making a note to unlock them last. That feeling does not go away, though. As I'm walking the floors one by one, it only gets worse as I move towards the older parts of the building. Now, I know I'm the only one in this building. I've been all through the first floor and the entrances are locked up tight. You can only do that with the key. As I get into the upper floors, though, I start hearing things. It starts with footsteps. It's hard to tell because it's like they're matching my cadence. What gets my attention is that it sounds like hard-soled shoes. Not like the boots that I'm wearing. I turn back and search the halls, but there's absolutely nothing. Then I hear a door slam from the hall that I just came from. I run back. It maybe took me a few seconds to get to the door, but there was nothing. It opens to an empty auditorium. which I thoroughly search. Still nothing. At this point, I shrug it off, old building and all. Maybe the pipes were clicking and I thought they were footsteps. Maybe I missed a door being opened and it rattled closed as I walked by. I continued on with that feeling getting stronger and stronger. I'm in the stairs to the 4th floor, and I'm taking a second to breathe and mess with my phone. I hear a door below me slam shut, and the distinct sound of footsteps echoing in the stairwell. I pull my radio to call dispatch and let them know someone's in the building. It beeps, telling me that the battery is dead and that it won't call out. Well, crap. I call on my phone and dispatch says that they'll send some guys. I wait, but I'm not hearing any more footsteps, no doors, no sounds at all. I walk all the way back down and back up to 4 and I find no one. Now I'm second-guessing myself and anticipating the coming jokes on my behalf. I move along, figuring that I'll finish the last floor and work my way down and meet up with the other guards. I open the door to the 4th floor, and everything is different. I'm not talking about a change in atmosphere or anything like that. I'm saying that the entire floor, which consists of old offices used for storage and whatnot, is completely different. White painted walls now have wood paneling. The clutter is gone, replaced by old lab and medical equipment, filing cabinets instead of boxes. The biggest change? At the end of the hall in each corner are 2 leather-bound chairs and 2 men sitting in them talking to each other. They stop and look at me as I stand there, holding the door in stunned silence. I blink, and it's all gone. Right back to normal. I don't understand it. 1 second, it's completely different from the hundreds of times I've stepped onto that floor. Next second, poof, back to normal. Instinctively, I try my radio again, remembering the dead battery as I hit the button. And it works. I call out that I'm on the 4th floor and that I need units up here as I start to check through each office. Of course, everything's normal when everyone gets there, and I'm still left wondering what the hell just happened. We finish checking the building, and I catch my fair share of bullcrap from the other guys. I go down to dispatch because I know that we have cameras on those floors, and I want to know what happened. I get to dispatch, and we review the cameras. We see the door open as I come in, and then the feed freezes entirely for about 8 seconds. Not necessarily unusual, but not very common, especially on those cameras. That tends to happen in more commonly traveled areas. So the dispatcher, a man who's been here since grass first sprouted, asks me what I saw. I describe it to him, and he says, "Weird. That's how it looked back in the 80s, before they redid the lower floors and those were all labs for the college." At this point, I'm just speechless, and I decide to save myself from further embarrassment and say that I must just be tired and seeing things. I know that's not the case, though. I'm wide awake and I know what I saw. I know what I heard through the rest of the building, too. I just don't know how to explain it. Everyone has their weird experiences in that building, but man, this one really threw me. This story is quite long, but it will all make sense in the end. I was born in Fort Lewis, Washington, in February of 1980. My father was in the U.S. Army, so we moved to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, when I was about 1.5 years old. After about a year, my father transferred back to Fort Lewis and finished his career there, until about September of 1983. After his time in the service ended, we moved to Montana, where both of my parents were born and raised. They grew up in small towns, my father's being one of the smallest, with a population of about 120 people. We moved there first and lived there for about 2 years before relocating to another, larger town. I was the only boy in the family, with 2 half-sisters from my mother's previous abusive marriage, and 2 full-blood sisters, one younger than I. So you can imagine the torture that I had to endure growing up. But that's irrelevant to my story. My parents were always trying to pursue better career opportunities, which is the reason for us moving around from a couple different towns. When I was in 2nd grade, our school was next to the junior high school, aka middle school, so the playground was next to the track field that the junior high students would hang out at. After lunch, we were outside during our extended recess, and I was playing on one of the balance beams, which was sitting on stiff springs to make balancing a bit more of a challenge. I looked across and noticed one of the female junior high students walking towards me, fairly fast and fairly aggressive. I didn't think anything of it because I was too busy playing. Without saying a word, she kicked me in the groin, twice, and so hard that it lifted me off of the beam and I collapsed in agony. I started crying. She then kicked me in the stomach while I was down, and the playground monitors came up to her and demanded to know why she did that. She responded with, "I don't like him." They asked if she knew me or what I had done to make her do that to me. In a disgusted voice, she snapped, "Just look at him. He's stupid." The playground monitors demanded that she leave immediately, and they called the junior high school. I never heard anything since, so I'm not sure if this girl received any kind of disciplinary action. I noticed that as each school year passed, I was considered the ugly boy who girls always said ew as I passed, including the girls who weren't much to look at either, and sometimes would even push me and then try to pass my germs onto each other in disgust. I never bothered them, but this kind of treatment, or bullying if you prefer to call it that, became a normal routine. It started with girls and then moved up to boys. Bus rides were even worse. I would arrive home with bruises from the boys and scratch marks and sore heads from hair pulling from the girls. I guess going through this put me in a depressed mindset, which changed my behavior and made me even less pleasant to be around. I started walking with a hunch and never felt very good about myself. Eventually, my grades started declining because I started daydreaming about being at home and playing because it was the only time I felt happiness anymore. School was miserable, and I ended up getting held back and had to repeat a grade. Sometimes I would try to fit in, but would only get rejected even more or even physically pushed. My friends were the only ones I was able to look up to, and they actually made me feel good about myself. After I started 5th grade, we relocated again to Helena, the state capital. I missed my friends terribly and had hoped that I would see them again someday. Helena was the town where we would finally settle. I was relieved to know that I would be away from those other kids who were mean to me, and I would be able to start fresh again. I was wrong. The bullying seemed to follow me, as though I was haunted. So I remained shy and chose to keep to myself. Through the remainder of the 5th grade, it started with girls again, but boys pretty much left me alone. I mainly dealt with rejection. I would ask girls I was interested in to the school dance, only to be rejected, and then insulted. My self-esteem was at an all-time low, and my grades were not the greatest, which caused me to be held back a second time, resulting in me repeating the 5th grade again. Here I was, 2 years older than the other kids in my class, lacking any kind of social interaction, which made me fairly awkward. So I decided to just accept it and became a loner. Once I started 6th grade, the female rejection continued, but I never had an issue with male students, since I kept to myself, and I always tried to be nice to everyone who did attempt any kind of interaction. Girls would look at me with disgust while I was passing in the halls. One of them even said gross as I walked by. I never talked to any of them, but due to the way that I was always treated before, I couldn't help but feel that maybe I deserved it, or that it was somehow my fault. I didn't believe I was really ugly, but since all the girls said I was, it must have been true. But I didn't deny that I was definitely scrawny. The most popular girl in school was also quite vicious towards me, and the only one among them who was willing to get physical. As I had my locker open, I was getting books out of my bag for my next class. Inside the locker, below the top shelf, was a hook for hanging your coat. After I grabbed the last book, I felt a hard shove on my back. The top of my head hit the hook, and I started bleeding. I instantly grabbed the top of my head and turned around to see the popular girl standing behind me with her arms folded. I shot her an angry look and asked her why she did that. She mouthed the words, "You're so gross," and stomped off. Luckily, the wound was very mild and had only bled for a few seconds, so it didn't need stitching, but it remained sore for the rest of the day. Later on that day, a group of boys, the school tough guys, approached me and informed them that Miss Popular had asked them to jump me, but they made it clear that they wouldn't because I was nice and they didn't want to. I thanked them, and then headed to my bus. But I never understood why girls found me to be so repulsive. I bathed regularly, and I know I didn't stink. I didn't even have acne. Since I chose to keep to myself, I never really had any friends. There were a group of boys who were not exactly angels or the best role models, but they were willing to take me under their wing. Yeah, they were considered a bad crowd, but it felt good to be accepted again. I hung out with them quite often, and eventually started displaying poor behavior. I stole cigarettes from my parents, vandalized mailboxes, snuck out, started getting involved with drugs, etc. Eventually, the trouble all caught up with me, and the law got involved. I was 15 and almost 16, and since I was a minor, I was put in the custody of the state, and I was sent to Billings, where I stayed at an all-male therapeutic group home. The group home was fairly strict, and you had to earn any kind of privilege, such as video games. The more serious you were about your treatment, the more privileges you earned. Boys that were not willing to dedicate themselves to their treatment, or acted like they didn't care, were transferred to a more strict facility, and the thought of that terrified me. So I remained focused and dedicated to my treatment. During my free time, I spent time lifting weights and playing video games. Eventually, I started putting on more muscle. It wasn't so much that you would notice at first glance, but enough that you would notice if you truly looked. I wasn't really scrawny anymore, and I actually gained some pectorals. Shortly before I turned 18, the group home staff threw me a party to celebrate my success and stated about how much I had grown and changed since I first got there. I was released 2 days before my 18th birthday and walked out with more pride and confidence than I had ever felt about myself before. My hunch was gone, and I had my confidence back. I said goodbye to everyone, exchanged hugs with some friends, one of whom cried as I was leaving, and then I got in my parents' car and rode 4 hours back home. Getting in trouble was a blessing to me, and it truly changed my life for the better. I was never very tall. I stopped growing at 16 and I'm only 5'8", but nobody teased me much about my height. After I turned 18, I got a job at McDonald's, but I never felt comfortable there because I just didn't feel like it was the job for me. I also noticed something else. Girls were not mistreating me. If anything, I got flirted with a lot. By a lot, I mean a lot. Apparently, many girls from school recognized me and treated me like I was the hottest guy they had ever seen. At this point, due to the way I was always treated, I took it as an attempt to prank me. So I had no problem saying no and walking away. I didn't trust them, because their treatment of me left a bad taste in my mouth anyways. And fast forward to January, just before I turned 21, and I had joined the US Army. My MOS was 13B, Cannon crew member, and I served in the 101st Airborne Division, 320th Field Artillery. During my time in the Army, women started to throw themselves at me everywhere that I went. In the beginning, I loved it. It was a new path in my life, so I knew that whatever was thrown at me was real, and I didn't have to worry about any bullies or pranks. I put on even more muscle and developed quite an athletic build. My PT score was over 300, and even though I didn't look like a bodybuilder, I definitely looked in shape. My veins bulged a bit, and my pectorals were even larger, which made me look sort of funny to others, because when I was walking normal, others would comment how I looked like I had a puffed out chest. It was all in good fun, though. Apparently, I got more and more attractive. At first, I ate it up, but later, I started to get a bit tired of it, where I decided to be more reclusive and frequent the clubs less. Fast forward a couple of months, the 9/11 attack happened. We eventually went to war with Iraq, and then my time in service was ending, and I was sent back stateside for out processing. I was honorably discharged with 2 Army Commendation Medals, an Army Achievement Medal, Good Conduct Medal, etc. Since my father's health was declining, I decided to go back home instead of re-enlisting. After I got home, I worked odd jobs here and there while finishing my 8-year contract in the reserves. I was still trying to find my place, and a lot of the girls that I went to school with noticed me even more than before. The attention was so overwhelming, and I wasn't used to seeing these same girls, who had treated me so badly, all of a sudden treating me like I was the hottest man they'd ever seen. I started dating again, but never any of the girls that I went to school with. And I landed in a relationship that lasted for 2 years, but we eventually broke up. Fast forward to July 2016, and my father had passed away. Since he was a veteran, he was given a veteran funeral, and I saluted my father as an honorable soldier during the playing of taps and gun salute. My life felt empty, like a huge chunk of me got ripped out, and I eventually put on a little weight, but not much. Over time, I came to terms with his passing and lost the weight that I had gained, and was back to having that amazing body, as most women put it. Fast forward to where I am in my late 30s, and I got comfortable wearing athletic shirts, like skin-tight Under Armour. Not for the appearance, but because I find them to be quite comfortable. I needed to get a new pair of shoes, and I was wearing my tight gray Under Armour shirt. I parked my car and was walking through the parking lot of the shopping district to Famous Footwear, and an old beat-up truck stopped in front of me on the road that runs in between the stores and parking lot. I was about 100 feet away, and I didn't think much of it until I looked ahead. 2 young girls who looked like they were still in high school were in the truck and literally stopped to gawk at me. One of them yelled, "Yow," like Joan Jett in I Love Rock and Roll. Then the other said, "Can I have your number?" I smiled and made a statement how even though I was flattered, I was old enough to be their father. They looked shocked and said sorry, which I then politely waved as they drove away. The sort of attention became super normal to me at this point. Since there was no escape, I decided to just accept and roll with it. And fast forward a couple more years, and now I'm 40 years old. It was about 10:30 p.m., and after a long day at work, I decided to stop at one of the corner gas stations in town. I may be in shape, with very little body fat, but I had a bad nicotine habit. I was wearing my black Under Armour shirt and was waiting in line to get my cigarettes and my favorite drink, Mountain Dew, when this woman who looked to be between the age of maybe 27 and 30 walked in and was clearly intoxicated. She wasn't ugly, but she wasn't really attractive either. I'm sure that if she was wearing makeup, she would have looked halfway decent. She looked around, and then her eyes caught me. She walked, more like stumbled, up to me, and then started circling me, slowly, like a vulture. She was leaning back at the hip as though she had a difficult time keeping her torso balanced. She kept circling and moving her head up and down like she was scanning me. After the third time of being circled, I was getting a really uneasy feeling, and I eventually said, "Can I help you?" She stopped to the left side of me and grinned. Her look sent shivers down my spine. She kept her head still while her eyes continued to look me up and down. I'd never experienced this type of thing before, and it was quite eerie and unsettling. She then slurred her words and said, "You are freaking hot." She then reached her hand out and touched my arm and said, "Oh my god, you are so freaking hot." I uncomfortably backed away and said thank you, and then went back to staring straight ahead like she wasn't there, hoping that she would just go away. I then felt her hand touch my left shoulder, and then gently run down my arm, which made my skin crawl. I politely asked, "Would you please stop touching me?" She said sorry, and then leaned in closer, and the stench of alcohol was overwhelming. She then slurred, "I'm gonna give you some money, and you're gonna buy me something." I said, "Like what?" She said, "In case you didn't know, I'm a little drunk and I need some beer, but they won't sell it to me. They said I'm too drunk, so you're gonna get it for me." I then said, "If they can't sell it to you, then it would be unlawful for me to get it for you, and I'm not about that." She then put her right hand on the left side of my face, leaned into me and tried hugging me with her cheek against mine, with her booze breath hitting my face, as she quietly said, "Please, you're so hot, and I'll bring you home with me and do stuff." My hair stood on end, and I got the worst vibes from this girl. I then snapped, "Okay, no, stop touching me. Get away from me." The other customers in line turned and shot me a combined look of shock and pity. The clerk then looked up. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave the store. I already told you that I'm not going to sell to you, and now you're bothering the other customers." Without saying anything, she gave what appeared to be a sigh of sadness and stumbled out of the door. I finally got up to the counter and bought a pack of cigarettes, my drink, and then I walked out. After exiting the gas station, I took a left to get to my car. As I was walking, I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't think anything of it since there were other cars parked near mine. I unlocked my car and got in. Just before I closed my door, I heard my passenger door open, which shocked me. I quickly got out while keeping my right leg in the car to see the drunk lady attempting to get in the passenger side of my car. "Excuse me," I snapped. "What are you doing?" She gave me a look of confusion. "Well, you're giving me a ride home." She then finished getting into my car. I knelt down. "No, I'm not. You need to get out of my car." She then expressed how she had no way to get home. Regardless of the extreme uneasy feeling and unnatural behavior, I took pity and asked her where she lived. She made it known that it was in one of the housing complexes, which was literally at the end of the block. That pity that I felt, it left me, and I snapped. "It's right over there. You can walk." She calmly said, "No thanks, I'll ride." At this point, I got angry. "Please, get out of my car." She then looked as though she was shocked and said, "You want me to go?" "Yes, please, get out of my car." With a sad look on her face, she looked down and slowly opened the door and got out. I then finally relaxed and sat back in my car. I closed my eyes and gave a sigh of relief, while leaning my head back against the headrest. I then felt the car move again, as though someone was getting in, and I turned and looked to see her getting back in my car and closing the door. At this point, I was beyond horrified and very angry. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Lady, if you don't get out of my car, I will drag you out myself and call the cops. Get out now." She refused to move. I went from partly horrified to just plain angry, and I got out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, and opened the door. She looked up at me and calmly asked, "What?" in a confused tone. "Either get out of my car now or I will drag you out." She then gave an angry huff and got out. I closed the door and turned around to walk back to my door when she then took a swing at me. Luckily, I have fast reflexes. I backed my head up and caught her wrist. I then physically turned her out of the way and gave her an aggressive shove. Not enough to knock her down, but enough to show her that I meant business. She then starts screaming at this other guy that was walking in the gas station, telling him that he needs to call the police because I hit her in the face. I firmly said, "No, I didn't." And she turned around and she screamed, "Yes, you did. Yes, you did, you liar." I calmly said, "Fine. Then I'm sure that all of these cameras out here will confirm your story and prove that I'm lying." She then gave a look of defeat, and I got back in my car and immediately locked the doors. After starting the car, I went into my vehicle settings and programmed my key fob to unlock just the driver's door instead of all of them. This meant that from now on, I have to push unlock twice on my key fob to unlock all doors. I wasn't about to let this type of thing happen ever again. I put the car in reverse, and my rear parking sensor went crazy. I looked behind me to see her standing there refusing to move. I called the police, and I explained everything to them, and they asked me to ask her to move. I informed her that I'm on the phone with the police and that she needed to move. She then huffed and got out of the way. I put the window back up and backed the car up and then put it in drive. As I was starting to roll forward, she hit my window with the side of her fist and then spit on it. I informed the police of that, which they also heard. I guess my car's Bluetooth is pretty good, so they asked me to describe her. They said they would send an officer to the scene. I asked if they needed me to stay, and they suggested that I leave, since she was clearly belligerent. I was relieved to get out of there. I was tired and had to work the next day. I didn't sleep very well that night. I had never experienced this type of thing before, and it was one of the creepiest moments of my life. Ever since then, I've been more cautious and aware of my surroundings. I would hate it if I ever ran into that woman again, sober or not. This took place last month, on the 24th, in a sushi restaurant in Columbus, France. My ex and I decided to go eat dinner in this small sushi place that we would often go to. We're on good terms and we still see each other from time to time. We sat down near the entrance, and I was facing the window. We had just started eating when a group of 4 17-year-olds came in and sat at the table next to ours. They began having a conversation about some weird guy they had encountered on their way to the restaurant. Apparently, he had a problem with one of the kids, who I'll call Tom. I don't remember much about what they said, except that the guy claimed he would come back for Tom. Tom had a motorcycle helmet, which he had put on the table next to him. This is important for later. I didn't think much of it and carried on eating. I don't remember how many people were there, but I would say that there were around 15 people. A few minutes later, I notice a guy at the window and I hear the kids say, "Holy crap, that's him!" The guy was at the window, angrily gesturing Tom to come outside. Since Tom wasn't coming out, the guy opened the door and told him to come outside. Tom provoked him, telling him, "Baise ta mère," go F your mother, a common French insult. Then, the guy let go of the door, pulls out a knife from his pocket, and charges at Tom. As soon as I saw the knife, my heart dropped. As the guy tried to stab Tom, he grabbed his helmet and strikes the guy with it. A fight breaks out in the middle of the restaurant, breaking everything. Our table was flipped. Every plate and soy sauce container got smashed on the floor. Everyone started panicking, but no one could leave as it was a very small restaurant, and they were fighting in front of the entrance. So, everyone backed up in the corner behind their tables. Me and my ex did the same. I kept telling my ex that we were getting the hell out of there, while she kept calling my name in panic, too scared to move. Realizing we couldn't leave, I just shielded her, staring at the fight. Tom and the guy were on the floor, Tom on top, the guy striking him in the back. I seriously thought that I was going to helplessly watch a 17-year-old get stabbed to death before my eyes. I was glued to the scene, fearing the sight of blood. Thinking Tom was getting stabbed repeatedly, I eventually turned around to my ex and put her head to my chest, telling her not to look. Two dads ended up breaking off Tom and the guy. One was this super muscular no business dad, and the other one was a smaller Papa Bear type dad. The crazy guy was pushed out of the restaurant. He kept saying that he was 47 years old, with kids, and that he would kill Tom. The owner instructed us to pull down the roll-up security gate, since we were the closest to the key on the wall that controlled it. All of us were now safe inside the restaurant. It was a complete mess. Food and sauce everywhere. Tables all flipped and pushed to the side. The buff dad who broke off the fight was here with his wife, baby, and 4-year-old daughter who was bawling her eyes out. I felt so bad for her, having to witness this at such a young age. A couple had called the cops, who arrived probably 3 to 5 minutes later, since the station was a 2-minute drive from the restaurant. And cops entered the restaurant and started inspecting and asking questions, and they went to see Tom, who got out of the altercation without a single scratch. Turns out, the guy's knife was really cheap, and when Tom struck him with his helmet, it had knocked the blade off the handle. The dude had kept hitting Tom with the back of the handle, hence why I thought he was stabbing him. Tom didn't seem affected by the situation at all. He had this smirk on his face. It felt like another day in the office for him. He looked the delinquent type, but still, I had expected him to be a little more affected by the situation. Either way, I was glad that he was okay. The cops took us outside and started getting our statements. Midway through our statements, we all noticed that a good 20 meters away, the cops had arrested the guy and were interrogating him. They eventually took him to the station. Tom and his friends explained the situation and what had happened before they entered the restaurant. According to them, the guy was just leaning on a light pole close to where he was arrested, and when they passed by, Tom had made eye contact with him. The guy then tried to intimidate Tom by doing that sudden head movement toward him to make him flinch. I don't know what it's called. Tom didn't react and just looked at him, which drove the guy nuts, who then said he would come back for him. I honestly think they were telling the truth. From what I saw, the guy definitely looked like the type to want to kill someone just for looking at them the wrong way. The second dad who broke off the fight, the Papa Bear one, was a sweetheart through the whole thing. He tried to talk to everyone, and he comforted the 4-year-old girl, which was really nice to see. I think that she'll be fine. She quickly stopped crying and referred to the guy as le voyeur, the robber. She's obviously too young to understand, and I'll hope that she forgets this ever happened. The cops let us go after getting our information. They never called us, so I don't know what happened to the guy. Since the cameras in the restaurants were fake, they'll have to make do with our statements. And since we all had the same version, I hope this maniac is locked up for attempted murder. When I was in high school, my friends and I got really into exploring abandoned places. We used to research places along the East Coast and drive during the summertime to check them out and take cool pictures. This one time, a kid we knew in my buddy's class told him about this abandoned mental asylum in Maryland. That was really cool because, unlike most places, it was a 5-building complex with a large center building that was 3 stories tall. I forgot the name, but if anyone knows what I'm talking about, feel free to share. Naturally, this piqued our interest. So that weekend, we told our parents that we were going on a fishing trip to Maryland, and all 6 of us road tripped to go see this place. And we started out by checking out the smaller building in the complex when we first got there, and slowly made our way around the area to look out for security. To give a sort of a layout of the asylum, all the buildings connected to each other aside from the main building and the church that was behind it. So, as we entered the first building, we decided to pull a Scooby-Doo and split up to cover more ground. I got paired with a kid in the group that didn't really want to be there to begin with, and we went down to the basement of the building. As we went down, I saw that there was a crude doorway near the staircase that was out of place from all the other large hallways upstairs. I convinced the guy I was paired with to check it out, on the condition that I went first. The layout of this room was kind of like a ramp, so if you kept walking back, it would get closer to the ceiling and a lot darker. We had one flashlight, which I gave to my friend, and I was using my phone's flashlight. So, as I walked in, I naturally got drawn to walk straight back while my buddy went to the left side instead. I remember saying to him as we were inside, "Damn, this place smells like crap." And when I turned around, the guy I'm with speed walks towards me and says that we need to leave. Now. Thinking he was just scared, I didn't argue with him, and we left. And I didn't think much of it for the rest of our time there. Later that week, my friends and I are at a party, and we're telling people all about the asylum that we had just explored. I start telling people about the main building, and the guy that I was paired up with comes by to hear what we're talking about. As I start talking about the basement and the room we were in, he pauses the story. He then tells me that there was a reason he made us leave so fast. It was because, as I was saying that the place smelled like crap, he saw the left side of the room had furnaces and piles of old shoes and white medical patient clothing. We were in the morgue, and I had no idea. Not sure if this is creepy to anyone else, but it sure did spook my friends and I. My friend tells me that she has some news and she wants to tell me about it. She was pregnant, so I'm assuming it's something about the baby. Her and her boyfriend, who is also my best friend, pick me up and we go to get some food. For context, we live in a very big city, and usually go to the inner parts of the city to get some tacos. The neighborhood is pretty ghetto, but not altogether dangerous. We're used to eating around the area, so it's nothing we thought twice about. We pulled into a parking lot that has many cars. The taco spot that we went to was on the street corner, and it was pretty popular. My guy friend asks us what we wanted, and said that he was going to go get the food and leave me and his girlfriend in the car so that we could talk. I assumed it was something serious, as we usually stick together. She proceeds to vent to tell me that she had a miscarriage, and that she feels pretty sad about it, as she was really happy she was going to be having the child. Now, keep in mind, the parking lot was filled with cars, but most of the cars were either empty or had people eating inside of them. There was a parking spot that was empty right next to us. As I begin to comfort my friend and tell her how sorry I was for her, we see what seems to be a Mercedes pull up next to us that was pretty new. We thought nothing of it and continued our conversation. We noticed a man get out of the car, and he seems to be dressed similarly to Johnny Depp in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. As my friend continues to tell me about what she plans to do next, this random guy, who not but 2 seconds ago just parked next to us, begins to knock on our window. Being from the city, and having to deal with random crackheads and strangers pretty often, my friend and I just told him to go away and that we didn't have any money. Even though the guy looked like he had money. Just as we tell him to go away, he starts speaking to us in Spanish, saying, "Y el bebé?" Meaning, and the baby. My friend and I glanced at each other in complete confusion, not knowing how this man knew the subject of our conversation. We had tinted windows, so he couldn't really see us as it was in the late evening. But he begins to cuff his hands and put it to the window so we can see inside of the car. My friend is literally staring at him, and he continues to ask us questions like, "Where is the baby?" and "How is the baby?" in Spanish. My friend and I are really confused, and she just looks at me with this dumbfounded look that I've never seen before from her. She tells him that he can go screw himself in Spanish, and as she starts cursing at him, he starts trying to open the door. Thank God our doors were locked. Just as I was about to start heading to the door to unlock it, so I could confront him face to face, my friend holds me back and says, "Wait, I think there's something wrong with him." I was about 5'10", 22 years old, and I weighed about 200 pounds. This guy was about 5'6" and middle-aged, so I knew I could have taken him. Just as my friend is trying to hold me back, my guy friend comes back with the tacos in hand. He's about 6'2" and weighs about 230. Being that my friends and I are punks, we obviously dress a certain way, and some people get intimidated by it. The guy that was trying to open the door seemed to have gotten intimidated by my massive friend, and got in his car and drove off as my guy friend looks on in confusion about what had just happened. He gets in the car and we start to tell him about what had happened. Now, his girlfriend and I have played pranks on him in the past, just to mess with him, so my guy friend is a little skeptic about if we're telling the truth or not. He tells us maybe this guy overheard our conversation and was on crack, and started to ask us random questions about the baby because that's what we were talking about. She explained to him that that was impossible, because the second that he parked, he got out of his car and started to knock on the door, asking us about a baby. My friend and I could not have been talking that loud for him to have heard our conversation. Not only that, but she wanted to talk about something else so she could stop crying about her miscarriage. So, there was absolutely no way that that guy could have heard us talking about her baby. Now that my girlfriend is more visibly upset, her boyfriend starts to believe us and says maybe the guy was confusing us for someone else. We sat there for a bit trying to figure out how that was possible, that this random man came out of nowhere and automatically started talking about a baby. Coincidence? Possibly. It was definitely a weird night for all of us. We start to head home. I don't usually scare too easily, but the situation did shake me up a bit. My head started to race with thoughts of every possible situation. I know this might not be inherently creepy, but I still wonder to this day about that night. How could he have known about my friend's miscarriage? He probably didn't, but then why talk about a baby? Why pull up into the parking lot and go crazy on us for no reason trying to look for a baby and then drive away as if nothing happened? About a year has passed since that has happened, and me and my two friends still talk about the incident to this day. We never saw that man again, needless to say, and we never went back to that taco spot again, even though the tacos were really good. Some context. We live in a town on a river. We also use weed. We can't buy the Delta gummies here in our town, and the nearest place is in a Crossroads gas station, about 30 minutes from us, across the bridge, in the next state. I got paid and wanted some gummies. My boyfriend said he would drive us up there to eat at the local diner, and then do our shopping in the morning. We left about 5 a.m., and when we got done eating, the sun was up already. My boyfriend takes my card and goes into the station. The story. We parked our pickup next to, from what I could see of him, an ancient old man in his pickup smoking a cigarette. Whatever, right? It's early, there's a diner, we're surrounded by farms and in between a couple of big cities. So I don't think much about other people being there. I sit and waited, and when I looked up, the old man had finished smoking, but he hadn't left yet. Again, whatever. They're busy, so maybe he's just waiting for a good chance to have plenty of time to leave. Like I said, he's ancient. His truck is older and smaller than my boyfriend's, so our windows aren't directly next to each other. We were parked pretty close to the door. I suddenly got this really horrible gut feeling after a few minutes. And my gut isn't normally wrong, so I start looking for the issue. I don't see anything weird, but the old man is still there. But he was moving around the front seat of his truck. He starts to open his door, which is directly next to mine, and that feeling gets worse. I'm trying not to stare and to stay calm, although I feel like I'm going to pass out. I think he was looking at me through his side view mirror. I made sure the doors were locked and kept watching him out of the corner of my eye, with my hand on my door just in case. He stopped moving, and after a second shut his door again. And then my boyfriend came out of the store and got in the truck. Thinking about it now, the old man probably saw him and realized he was coming for our truck, and then stopped whatever he was doing. Anyway, he laughed to himself, and when I asked, after we had started driving, he said he suddenly got the idea to fight that old man out of nowhere, and he was going to kick his door closed if he tried to get any further out of his truck. I told him what had happened just barely a minute before he came outside, and we joked about how weird it was that we were both ready to fight this old man at the same moment. But I'm high now, and thinking about it again, I'm really weirded out. So this was today's collection of true scary stories from Reddit. Fantastic collection. Really good stories here, and hopefully you all enjoyed them. I know that I did. A lot to take in. A lot of different subjects, a lot to take in, a lot of interesting things happening. So, again, hopefully you all enjoyed the stories. If you did, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing if you are new to the channel. You can also leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts on the stories, or if there's a topic you'd like me to do in the future, please do let me know. I do take suggestions and use them when I can. Now, I'm going to tell you all right now, Friday's video is not going to be a normal video. I know it kind of ruins the joke or the surprise, but I'm setting this up right now to tell you it's going to be a little different. Okay? If you've been around, you might have an idea of what it'll be. If not, I hope you're not disappointed. We will return to normal videos on Monday, as always, but Friday is going to be a little more fun. It's also why this video is a little longer. So, anyways, friends, I hope you all have a great day. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, beautiful weekend. I hope I see you on the next video. But of course, until then, beautiful people, sleep well.